Nowhere Else to Go, Chapter 12, a Miraculous Ladybug Fanfiction. If you're new to this story or missed any of the previous chapters, you'll find links in the description box, or click on the card in the upper right corner for the playlist. Enjoy the story! Are you sure you're ready for this? Ladybug murmured. Adrien nodded resolutely and pressed the intercom button. Instead of Natalie, it was Gabriel's voice that answered.
Adrien.
The greeting sounded choked. The camera swiveled onto his companion.
You brought Ladybug?
Adrien set his jaw.
Where I go, she goes.
Gabriel hummed in reluctant acceptance, and the gate clicked open. Ladybug walked close to Adrien's side the whole way to the front door, her arm pressed against his. She wanted to take his hand to give him strength, but she had to keep a professional distance. She was only here as his bodyguard. When they entered, Gabriel was alone at the top of the steps, Natalie noticeably absent. He came down to meet them, stopping before his son. His mouth was pulled into a steep frown.
It's all over, Adrien.
There was no greeting, no preamble.
Everything I did, it's behind me. It's done. I'm done. Come home, please. You're only saying that because we took your Miraculous.
Ladybug looked sideways at Adrien. His eyes were burning and his hands clenched, giving him an air of fierce determination, but she knew that if that flame faltered, he would be in danger of falling apart. Gabriel looked hurt.
Do you really think I wouldn't have stopped after learning that it was you under that mask? I never would have done this if I had known.
And yet it would have been okay to endanger someone else's life? Adrien cut in.
You were willing to kill Cat Noir to get the Miraculous. Kill? Never. I never intended that. I didn't think you would be so stubborn. I thought it would make the choice easier for you to give up the Miraculous. I never intended to harm Ladybug and Cat. To harm you. I never intended to harm you.
Gabriel's eyes looked sunken in, the weight of the words adding years to his age.
I thought it was the only way to make you come home, the only way to make you understand me. Why would it make me come home?
Adrien growled, and the way he enunciated make was almost mocking. Ladybug didn't like where this conversation was heading. Adrien had said he wanted to make peace with his father, but this was turning into a confrontation. Maybe it was too early for this conversation. Gabriel pinched the bridge of his nose and squeezed his eyes shut, heaving a deep breath before asking calmly,
Adrien, do you know why I wanted them?
Adrien hadn't wanted to ask Nuru, saying he preferred to hear it from his father's mouth. He glared at Gabriel for several beats before answering. He was trembling. It wasn't obvious, but Ladybug could feel it where their shoulders were touching.
No. Why? To bring back your mother.
Gabriel sighed, sounding fatigued.
I needed her. You needed her. She completed us. Our family. We're broken without her, aren't we, Adrien?
A chill ran through Ladybug. All she knew about Adrien's mother was that she had disappeared a little more than 2 years ago. It scared her that she felt pity for Gabriel. He looked lost and helpless. He believed his words completely. She vaguely recalled that Hawkmoth had said he was motivated by love. He really believed that he was trying to fix his family. That was your wish? False lightness barely covered up the tension in Adrien's voice. Ladybug glanced at him briefly and saw that some of the anger had left his face. But the trembling in his arm had intensified, betraying that he was shaken by Gabriel's confession, and Ladybug shifted her weight imperceptibly toward him as a sign of support.
Yes, that was my wish.
Gabriel's eyelids lowered. He looked almost submissive and resigned, like a weary old man.
What makes you so confident that I would have come back to you? I didn't expect you to forgive me for my actions. I'm a ruined man, Adrien. I raised a hand against my own son, and you didn't understand why. I don't blame you for running away. But if your mother asked you to come home, would you refuse? If you saw her again, wouldn't you realize it was all worth it? Father.
Adrien shook his head, momentarily at a loss for words.
This is crazy. This isn't right. How can you rationalize terrorizing Paris? Do you really think she would have wanted you to go this far? You've become a criminal, Father. Adrien, don't you understand?
Gabriel pleaded.
It was for you. I may have made mistakes, but I never hurt anyone, and I was doing it all for you. I don't know how to be a good father.
His voice faltered and he looked at the ground.
Parenting was her territory. I took risks, terrible risks. I ruined myself for the chance to bring her back. But I don't regret what I did. I had to try. Can't you understand, Adrien? Can't you forgive me? I'm sorry you got involved, Adrien.
Involved. That's what he was going to call directly threatening his son's life. Once by dropping him off a tall building, fully knowing that it was Adrien, and once by nearly drowning him. As Ladybug watched Gabriel practically grovel for his son's approval, a feeling of disgust grew in her. All this because he couldn't move on and be the father Adrien needed. He'd managed to convince himself that he could take matters into his own hands, endangering the lives of many to fix his own home.
I don't think Mom would approve of what you did,
Adrien said darkly.
What if you brought her back and she hated you for it? What then?
Why wouldn't she approve?
I never hurt anyone.
Gabriel insisted in his defense, and Ladybug shuddered at the realization that he believed this to be true.
You did. You did hurt people. You hurt me. If it weren't for Ladybug's miraculous cure, I'd have broken ribs. I'd be bruised. If it weren't for Ladybug, I'd be dead. Not to mention all of Paris being drowned, frozen, turned into monsters. Ladybug is the only reason Paris still exists. No thanks to you,
Adrien nearly shouted.
And do you know what kind of psychological damage you've caused?
Ladybug touched his hand, just barely. Calm down, please, she pleaded silently. This conversation was quickly devolving. She checked the time on her yo-yo. The police force should be situated outside the house now. Gabriel's eyes burned with cold fire. When he spoke, his voice came out tense with frustration and anger.
I never wanted any of that to happen. If you and Ladybug had just given me your miraculous, this all would have been so easy. You brought this upon yourselves. Why do you still oppose me? Don't you miss your mother?
Adrien jerked and gasped. Ladybug glared at Gabriel, appalled at him for daring to lay the blame on Adrien. She hadn't intended to get involved in this conversation between father and son, but Adrien had been rendered speechless and she couldn't let Gabriel deal out this kind of psychological abuse. She spoke up. The wish wouldn't have come free. There would have been a price.
I know. I hoped at best it would take me,
Gabriel said quietly. He looked at Adrien, addressing him.
Then, at least, you would have your mother. How could you control that?
Adrien looked horrified.
It could have been an innocent, unsuspecting person. It could have been me. She was my life, Adrien,
Gabriel said desperately, by way of explanation.
I knew there was a risk, but what choice did I have but to try?
Adrien's breathing quickened as he gaped at his father.
You could have moved on. You had a family. You had me. I wasn't enough of a reason for you to stop and accept that she's gone? But I did stop,
Gabriel protested.
Too late. You almost killed me, Father. You went too far.
Adrien's accusations punctuated his short, panicked gasps. Adrien! Ladybug touched the back of his forearm. Breathe. Gabriel's face was twisted as if Adrien's words physically burned him.
I love you, Adrien. Please, believe me,
he pleaded, flooded with emotion.
I don't believe you. I don't trust you.
Gabriel clutched his chest.
Please, Adrien, I'm your father.
He gave Adrien a plaintive look that terrified Ladybug.
Come home, Adrien. You're all I have left.
Adrien shook his head frantically, taking a step back.
No, you don't have me, because you're unfit to be a father, and I'm going away.
He laughed almost hysterically.
To think, all this time, all I wanted was your approval. Well, you know what? I don't approve of you.
Ladybug's concern for Adrien's mental state overcame her need for professionalism. Keeping her eyes fixed challengingly on Gabriel, she took one of Adrien's balled fists, stroking the back of his hand until the fist softened and his breathing evened out. Gabriel watched this interaction, the embers in his eyes dying down. He looked utterly defeated, like the hollow shell of a man. Instead of retorting, he said in a flat tone,
I know that, Adrien. I did everything you asked. I didn't go looking for you. I let you be. And yet, you've turned me in. Well, I accept my fate. The life I'm leaving behind is worthless. I have nothing to lose.
He walked up to Ladybug, who instinctively tensed and adopted a combat stance. Gabriel lifted a lapel, reached into an inner pocket of his jacket, and extracted something, which he held out to Ladybug in a closed fist. She hesitantly held out her palm, and he dropped something into it. The peacock miraculous. As soon as she accepted it, Gabriel wordlessly walked past them toward the front door. Adrien spluttered, spinning around and following Gabriel with his eyes.
What, just like that? You're just going to walk away? Worthless? Nothing to lose? Do I count for nothing? I thought you said you loved me. Am I not enough to make your life worthwhile?
You were right, Adrien,
Gabriel said with his back to them, one hand on the door. If the mansion hadn't been silent, his voice probably wouldn't have been audible.
I went too far. I can't reverse my actions. And neither can you.
He half turned his head, showing his profile. His lips were quirked up in a sardonic smile.
How can you fault me when you never intended to forgive me? I'm well aware that this is an ambush.
As if to prove his words, he pushed the door open, revealing the cadre of armed officers waiting on the other side. He laughed humorlessly, then held out his hands. Adrien shook with silent sobs as they handcuffed Gabriel and began to lead him down the steps at gunpoint. He went with them, obedient and resigned. Ladybug turned over the peacock miraculous in her hand, feeling shaken by this whole exchange and haunted by the way Gabriel had laughed. "Come on, Adrien," she murmured, leading him toward the curving staircase to the upper story, with one hand on his arm. "Let's go to your room." They were already here. He may as well pack a proper suitcase for his impending relocation, as much as it hurt to think about that. The police chief was at the door. She met his eyes, silently communicating that they'd stay a bit longer. The chief nodded and shut the door behind him. Adrien was still shaking, and a glance at his face showed her silent tears pouring down his cheeks. His teeth were grit in a grimace of anger and pain. Ladybug led him to his room and sat him down on the bed. So much for making peace. The talk had reopened old wounds and made fresh ones. Adrien's choked sob broke out through the stillness of the room. Ladybug wrapped her arms around him as he broke down, heaving with tears as if he wanted to cough out his own soul, the same way he had those first few nights in her room as Cat Noir. "He's just a man," Ladybug said softly, stroking his hair. "Don't let him crush you, Adrien. He's a broken man who made mistakes. Other people love you. Your friends love you. I love you."
"Ladybug,"
Adrien choked out.
"He wanted to bring back Mom."
"Oh." Ladybug's heart clenched, her head spinning. She didn't know how to deal with this. "I'm sorry, Adrien," she whispered, feeling powerless. He continued to sob, one hand covering his face as if he were ashamed of himself for crying. How many minutes passed like this? 20? 30? An hour? The sobs subsided, but Adrien was catatonic, staring out the window, breath shuddering now and then with the ghost of his emotion. "Talk to me, Adrien," Ladybug pleaded, quietly, running one gloved thumb over his cheekbone to catch a stray tear. He was scaring her. She couldn't be sure how much he had believed of what Gabriel had said. He caught her hand and pressed it into his cheek, closing his eyes and leaning into it. She delicately kissed his other cheek, tasting salt, wishing she could reach into him and heal his heart.
I will,
he whispered, his grip on her hand tightening.
I just need time.
Ladybug bit her lip, her stomach churning with uneasiness, hating the fact that time was quickly slipping between their fingers, hating that he would have to heal on his own in an unfamiliar place, surrounded by people who didn't understand what he'd gone through. She wanted, more than anything, to be by his side until he was perfectly okay. The tense atmosphere was broken by a ringtone. It was the burner phone the police chief had given Adrien so they could contact him about the arrangements for Guadeloupe. He extracted it from his pocket and stared at it as if he didn't know what a phone was. Gently, Ladybug took it from his hands, touched the accept button and pressed it to her ear.
Hello? It's Ladybug. I'm with Adrien, but he can't come to the phone right now. Yes, he's okay. No need. Tomorrow? 1:45. I understand. I'll pass on the message. Yes, sir. Thank you. She hung up, dropping the phone on the bed and pulling Adrien to her chest comfortingly. He collapsed against her, still too much in shock to even hug her back. It was social services. Your flight is tomorrow, at 1:45 p.m.
Adrien didn't move, but Ladybug felt tremors as he started to cry again.
We get one more night.
He sobbed harder, finally wrapping his arms around her.
That's supposed to be a good thing, Minu.
She dropped a kiss onto his head.
Come on, let's pack.
Marinette and Adrien may have been in denial the previous night about the fact that they would be separated. This time, though, the reality that Adrien's flight was scheduled pressed down on them with the weight of its finality. They didn't watch any movies this time. They lay in Marinette's bed, trapdoor cracked open to let in a cool breeze, listening to the sound of crickets. Marinette didn't care what her parents would think if they happened to walk in. This was their absolute last night. Adrien clung to Marinette from behind, and she held his arms to her stomach, tingling from his breath against her ear and the beating of his heart on her back.
I can't do this, Marinette,
he whispered.
I can't leave. I need you.
Marinette clenched her teeth. She wanted him to stay, of course. She wanted to find the loophole that would let him stay. But getting his hopes up would be cruel. Instead, she needed to help him accept this reality. She turned in his arms and embraced him, tucking into his chest and running her hands down his spine.
Yes, you can. You're strong and brave, Adrien. You're Cat Noir.
What am I without my ladybug?
He sounded broken.
You're amazing.
He didn't respond. Marinette just held him, rubbing his back slowly, soothingly, matching his breathing with hers. At least he was calm. She had almost drifted off to sleep when he spoke again.
I'm going to have to leave the Miraculous behind.
You'll still always be my kitty,
Marinette mumbled, stroking the back of his head.
We'll go to Master Fu's together in the morning. But for now, go to sleep, Minu.
She awoke in the middle of the night, relieved to find that he'd managed to fall asleep. Breathing in his scent as she buried into his chest, Marinette finally let her defenses down and cried until sleep overtook her again. Thank you for listening to Chapter 12 of Nowhere Else to Go. Let me know what you thought in the comments or leave a like to support the channel. Until next time.